Wamanjika, everybody. Hi and welcome to the sold out High Life Expo, which is amazing. Thank you for joining us today at the Charging Ahead session. I'm Sophie Tawney, your host for the day, and I am an executive member of Electrify Boroondara, which is not Boroondara Council, it's a community-led alliance which is run by volunteers, and we are helping to accelerate the transition, the energy transition in our community. So we do that by informing and educating as much as we can. So pleasure to be a host here today. Now, we've got a very great session today, jam-packed. We are here until 1:30, and in that time we've got a full panel of speakers, and we also have a good chunk of time for your questions, which is really, really important. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to introduce each of the speakers now, and they'll come up and talk. And then when it's time for the Q&A, I'll invite them to join us on the panel. And there's a microphone just next to the cameraman. And if you'd like to come up during the Q&A, that would be great. And I'll just call on your questions then. So first of all, we have Adam from Watrix, and we have Tait, who's the sector manager for apartments at JetCharge. We have Bruce from Thompillai, I think I've said that right, and Cleat, who will give some great insights about how they funded their EV charging project. And we have Nicholas, who's the Chief Executive of Facilities Management Australia. And then our session sponsor today, Sebastian, who's Sustainability and Project Manager from the Engine Property Group, and partner Anthony from Specialised Solar and Electrical will join us for the Q&A. So we've got a great Q&A panel. So over to you first, Adam. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. Look, I'll introduce myself. Can you hear me okay? My name is Adam Farrugia, so I'm stepping in on behalf of David Hamilton from GHIC, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. A couple of weeks ago, David asked me to talk on behalf of him because I'm the CEO of Watrix Electrical. So Watrix and GHIC have done multiple projects over the last few years. And an example of that, our team have done over 60 scoping studies from small residential buildings up to fairly large towers of over 1,000 unit lots for owners corporations throughout Melbourne. We've completed over 25 EV retrofit installations across similar sized buildings throughout Melbourne. So I'm independent, I'm not affiliated with GHIC. We work with all of the major manufacturers and suppliers, so we know them all, and we're a non-biased provider in this space. So, look, this is sort of how we see the future roadmap of the EVs rolling out. Into the near future, more EVs are coming online, whether we like it or not. We sort of see that, in about 4 years is going to come to the crunch of if we don't start acting now, the supply and demand is going to create a bottleneck. So we've already experienced some increase in copper prices and things like that. So the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be. A bit of a fear of mine is if we all move at the same time in a couple of years, then potentially we're going to pull some companies into the space, similar to what we've seen in the solar industry over the last 10 years of fly-by-nighters that may deliver, say, substandard installations and putting the building at risk and owners' corporations at risk and additional stress on these buildings that were never designed to have EV infrastructure. So, in a standard residential installation, you own and control everything. You can buy an EV charger, you can slap it on your wall in your garage and off you go. Strata is different. You've got to access common property. There's a complex mesh of legal framework, commercial decisions, commercial, contracts that are going to be organised. There's a technical assessment on the building, which is unique to your building. Not all buildings are the same. So there's some decisions that need to be made that are unique to you. So if you don't get all three of these right, then the wheels will fall off. Look, in our experience, you need to undertake all of these steps. So it's a complex project to do an EV retrofit installation into one of these type buildings. It needs to be carefully managed by the owners' corporation, and you need to ensure that it's a collective decision and not driven by somebody's personal interests, and the installation is for the common good of the property and all of the residences that live there. So from what I'm hearing, and having someone like a GHIC run an independent owner survey really sheds some light onto how people feel about the building and what you can achieve off the back of it. And in more cases they're not, and becoming more as we go, that it always surprises a committee on how supportive the building is towards EV retrofit. People want their car parks to be EV ready, basically. Some of the lessons that we've learnt, electrically speaking, we've been in this space, being Watrix talking here, for over 15 years. We understand strata buildings and we understand the working of how these buildings work. Some of the challenges that we've come across is when, say, the building was built 70, 50, 20 years ago, some of the installations may not have been done to code. And we've had on more than one occasion where part of our scoping study, we'd highlight that there was some issues in the cable configuration, the way it was installed, and we cannot simply just connect EV infrastructure cabling into these switchboards. So, we highlight the owners' corporation at the time to say, not only have you got the cost of the EV infrastructure upgrade, you've got the basically rectification works of these switchboards that need to be done as well. So you've got a double cost. So you need to be sure that when you're selecting your installation and partners in this space, you're getting all this information in the beginning, not at the end. You'd hate to have 3/4 of your installation done on the 11th hour, then be told, look, we can't connect. The power company, the electrical inspectors won't allow us to connect because of this switchboard. We've got to now spend X amount of money to fix X, Y, Z. Just something to be considerate of. And funding has probably been another one that we've seen has been the showstopper, which I'll talk a little bit more about as we go. A couple of the don'ts, in our opinion, is, you can't, in a strata building, just go plug an EV charger into a common area GPO. What we've found on multiple occasions is people go out and buy an EV vehicle. The building, being a brownfield building, is not EV ready yet. So they get a couple of extension leads, plug their charger in, and off they go. From an OC perspective, you can't do that. From an electrical perspective, these circuits were never designed to have these sorts of load on them. And you can't also just go out and wire a network of GPOs throughout a common area car park and plug all these EV chargers in. There's no load management system. Remember, these buildings were never designed to have these sorts of loads on them in infrastructure, so it's critical that we're thinking of it from the beginning and it's a holistic view. Another one on more than one of occasions that we've had is visitor car parks. So I'd say majority of the time we get asked, can we just put fast chargers or chargers in the visitor's car park as a quick fix? Some scenarios you can get away with it. Other scenarios, you might find that if you change the use of that visitor's car park, it's no longer a visitor's car park anymore, it becomes a dedicated EV charging bay. So you may need to get a building permit, and it may be OC regulatory requirements you've got to consider. Just trying to highlight some of the things that we've experienced here, and just when you go down this journey, just make sure you're considering all of these things. As I said earlier, funding and finance is probably the biggest showstopper, and I would say it would be 95% of the projects that haven't gone ahead has been due to funding. I think, in my opinion, the industry's got to work together. You've got to find a way to make this work. EV infrastructure is not cheap. It's quite expensive, in fact. So, on average, in our experience, it can be anywhere from, say, $900 to $1,500 per lot to get the car park EV ready. That's just the backbone cabling. Not only that, on top of that, if one of the owners goes out and buys an EV, they've also got to then pay to have their sub-circuit cabling wired from that distribution board in the car park to the end charger. So they've sort of got a bit of a double whammy. It is an expensive exercise. It's something to be considered. And, another thing that we've also seen is copper. So over the last, say, 12 months, it's about 35% price rise in copper that we've experienced. We're expecting it to continue to increase moving forward. Electrification, supply, demand, we can't see it coming down in the near future. So not only is it expensive now, it's been more expensive as we go, potentially. So basically wrapping it up, these are the things that, this is a result of a successful installation. You've got a complex infrastructure or mesh of electrical infrastructure. You've got smart chargers that I'm sure Tait will talk about next. You've got third-party billing systems. You've got housekeeping and signage. It is the change to your building. It is a fairly substantial piece of infrastructure that's different and new. You need to make sure you get all this sort of stuff right. So that's it from my presentation today. So thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Tait Bonito. I'm the apartment sector manager at JetCharge, and today I'm going to talk about the challenges of EV charging in apartment settings and how taking the hard road leads to the best outcome in the long run for your building. So to start with, I'll give a quick overview of JetCharge. We've been around for the last 10 years. We started off as Tesla's EV charging installer. For when people bought Tesla vehicles, they would come to us for their home installations. And since then, we've scaled to a team of over 150 people across Australia and New Zealand. That's been backed by funding from the Australian government via the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, as well as a $30 million investment by RACV, whose facilities we're in today. A quick overview of what we do. We do project design and delivery for EV charging installations, as well as hardware and software, and that's where our focus in Strata is on critical AC charging hardware and load management systems, as well as software to support the operation of EV charging in these buildings. And these are some of our key products. We've got our JetCharge ChargeMate AC charging station. It's a smart charger and it's Australian made. We've also got our JetCharge Core load management system. This is a really critical part of EV charging infrastructure in apartments, as it's able to control the EV charging power draw within safe limits of the building electrical infrastructure. And then finally, we've also got our Illuminate software product, and this allows us to monitor the status of chargers in a building and see if they're online, if there's any faults, and helps with troubleshooting. So now I'll talk about a few challenges that I'm sure many of you in the room might be familiar with. Firstly, it all starts with a couple of EV owners in a building. There'll be a couple of owners who might be a small and vocal minority asking for EV charging in the building, and generally the owners' corporation is quite receptive. They want to help these owners get EV charging in the building. They want to give them the convenience of charging at home, but there are lots of uncertainties on the impact of the building, and we all know that costs play a really big factor in this. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the OC is left with balancing the immediate needs of EV owners in the building with the long-term needs of everyone in the community. So we see that this often leads to two paths that the OC can take. There's an easy road, what might seem like the most straightforward starting point, and then there's the hard road, one that takes a lot more effort, a lot more time to plan out, and Adam spoke to some of those points earlier. So we'll do a comparison and see what some of the outcomes of these two paths have been. Firstly, we'll talk to the easy road, and we've got an example of a building where, firstly, one EV owner arrived, they had a Tesla vehicle, and they requested to the owners corporation to install an EV charger in their car space. The OC allowed them to do that, and they had a Tesla charger installed. They also had a private electricity meter installed to meter the electricity usage at the charger, so the user could pay for the energy they use. A second EV owner arrived in the building, also a Tesla owner. and also got a Tesla charger installed with a private electricity meter. This isn't too bad just yet, but you can already see in the two photos there, there's a small difference in those installations. They look a bit different. The third EV owner threw a bit of a curveball into this. It was a Hyundai Kona owner, and Hyundai told the EV owner that they should install a Delta AC wall box, a different type of charger. The installer also notified this owner that the billing and the metering of the charger could be simplified through a smart billing platform called ChargeFox. And so the ChargeFox billing system was used instead of a private electricity meter. A fourth owner came along, again, another Tesla owner. This time they also wanted a charger, and because the OC now knew about the ChargeFox billing software, they asked the owner to install a smart AC charger, this time a JetCharge ChargeMate AC charger. Finally, we had another new EV owner come, a BYD owner. This time the OC said again, you need a smart charger with the ChargeFox software, and this time again, another AC charger. At this point, the electrician started to tell the building, you've got a lot of chargers on site. You really need to start thinking about how much spare capacity you have, new infrastructure, maybe a load management system. And so by the time a sixth owner came along, the OC had to tell them, well, we can't install a charger for you yet because we're not sure about how much spare capacity there is. There's a lot of investigations we need to do first. And this is a story we've seen time and time again over the last 5 years. OC is wanting to help the first few owners and not wanting to have the difficult conversations in the long run. And so where does that get you? The destination of the easy road is inconsistency in the EV charger selection, installation and billing methods. You often have a limited number of EV owners who can connect, so only some people might have to have their EV charger installations delayed. It also becomes a transition point where you need to move to the infrastructure that we'll talk to in a second, and that becomes costly, and some owners might need to replace their EV chargers. So now we'll talk about the hard road, what will lead to long-term provisioning for all car spaces and an easier process for everyone in the building. Some of the fundamentals that Adam spoke to is backbone infrastructure, electrical and communications cabling throughout the car park, our load management system, smart EV chargers and a billing software. So to talk a bit more detail into the EV charging backbone, we have cable tray that's put around the car park to facilitate the cable path from private car spaces back to distribution boards. And then for load management, you often need to add in power meters into the main switchboard to integrate and monitor the building load. Once that infrastructure is in place, then you can permit EV owners to install EV chargers through smart chargers. Often you might need a specific type of mounting post, and then they'll need to be commissioned to billing and load management software. And depending on the type of charger, you might need a charging cable to connect from the charger to the vehicle. So now we'll go through a couple of case studies of buildings that took the hard road and invested in the backbone infrastructure to future-proof their building from day one. The first building is Tennyson Reach Apartments in Queensland. There are 215 apartment lots at this building with over 400 car spaces, and they decided from day one they're not going to permit anyone to install an EV charger until the backbone infrastructure is in place. So it took about 2 years from conception to the completion of the project, and a total cost of $311,429, which came to about $1,500 per lot. This was a really great project because there was a lot of support and uptake from owners in the building, and 20 owners elected to install an EV charger as part of the project at an additional cost of $4,900. And then an additional 70 owners also elected just to install the wiring to their car space to future-proof it for when they did purchase an EV. And here are some photos of the backbone infrastructure. We've got a dedicated EV charging distribution board and communications rack, some cable tray throughout the car park, and a couple of photos of the ChargeMate chargers installed. This is also a snapshot of our Illuminate software product that we use to monitor the status of the chargers on site. And so if there's a charger that's faulted for some reason, we pick this up on Illuminate and then can react accordingly. Our second case study is Dock 5 Apartments here in Victoria. There are 148 apartments at this building. And again, they didn't permit EV chargers to be installed until the EV backbone was in place. And we worked with Adam from Wattrix to deploy this solution in their building. They installed an EV backbone with our critical load management system and the ChargeFox billing software. And they had 18 owners install the EV charging infrastructure, install the EV charging station from day one, with an additional 17 installing the wiring. And we're a year on now since the project was complete, and an additional 5 owners are installing EV chargers in their car space. Here are some quick photos from Dock 5 apartments with the distribution board again, the jet charge core load management system, and some of our ChargeMate AC chargers. So now to talk about the destination of taking the harder road. It might take you a bit longer, but ultimately you get a better outcome for your community in the building. You are able to provision all apartment residents for EV charging and make clear and easy, simple rules to follow for them to get EV chargers when they need them. You also see that you actually get consistency in your EV charger installation and the types of chargers that are installed. And ultimately this adds value to the property and all apartment lots. So to end on, I've got a couple of key recommendations and takeaways. Don't take the easy path, obviously. Don't permit EV owners to install chargers until you've got a plan in place for your building. Also understand your site. Start with a power and load assessment. Work with your local electricians, work with an electrical contractor who understands the ins and outs of your building to understand your spare power and what infrastructure needs to be installed. We also recommend budgeting early. These projects can take a long time to get off the ground, so it's important to understand how to raise the funds. And last but not least, engage with the community. Make sure the residents are on board, understand the process, and understand the benefits you're bringing to the community. Thank you very much.
It's a long way up there when you start to get a little bit older.
Okay, thanks everyone. This is Cleat Wilson. Watson, sorry, Cleat, who lives here in this apartment. Cleat is a resident, an owner, but most importantly is a very proud new EV owner. And very, very importantly is the chair of our Owners Corporation. My name's Bruce Thompson. It says Thompillai there. My father-in-law, his surname is Krishna Pillai. He's a neighbour of Cleat's and I hold the title on that. And so 2 years ago, Cleat strapped me in to join the Owners Corporation committee to sort out how we get EV charging. All of the presentations from Anthony and Tait before are really, hopefully what we'll do is do a very quick step through of how we practically navigated that hard road and dealt with all those issues that Anthony raised. And I think what we're going to do a bit more is like join in the Q&A session, but we just wanted to give you a taste of practically what we did. So there's sort of three things to cover off: the equipment, what did we choose, the funding, which Cleat's going to talk to us, and then some of those issues about how do we actually get it all to happen in a practical sense. There's a lot of detail on this slide, but really what we chose two 7 kilowatt chargers. We put them in common visitor car parking spaces. We chose them because after looking at the potential to allocate charging to each of the sites, there was a cost, a capacity issues, all of those. We've got an apartment block, there's about 20 apartments. We've currently got 3 EV owners, and so the basic forecasting is that we can cope with that utilisation of those in common areas comfortably for the next couple of years. It was a budget that was realisable and it allowed us to fund that. And so we've got, in the practical sense, we've got some of Tait's units. We've got 2 jet charge units. We've got cabling for a 3rd unit, and we use ChargeFox as the billing system to be able to recover the expense. Probably though, once we work through the technical side, which I helped do it, I think what we really was the important part in the project, and Cleat and also absent member of the Owners Corporation committee is Jeff, has really worked out, well, how do we actually fund this program? How do we cover the capital cost and then the operating cost? Jeff, Cleat, I'm getting it really wrong. Do you want to sort of tell us how you sort of navigated that?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Michael.
We should do this more often. We do.
I think the main thing to do when you embark on this process is to define what you're trying to do. And by that I mean, do you want to become an EV charging company? Or do you want the other extreme, which we opted for, to provide adequate EV capacity to get owners to an EV charging facility? We went down the path of, and just going back to the other speakers, everything that the 2 previous speakers covered, we went through that process. We made the mistakes. And the important bit, I think, is to really define what you're trying to do. Once we came to the realisation we didn't want to be in the business of being a company that's providing EV facilities. We wanted to be an owners corporation that just wanted to help our owners on the path to EV driving, which I have to say as a free plug, is an absolute delight. And it's very, very cheap. We were fortunate after some of our missteps to find Bruce. And he was the technical brains that enabled us to come up with a solution that was affordable. Because we're only a small owners corporation. We've got 20 apartments, and trying to get agreement out of 20 people to spend some significant money is pretty easy when I see some of these blocks that are 400 owners or 200 owners, 148 owners. If you try and get money out of that number of people, you're on a slow path to non-resolution. So we can come back to that during the Q&A, but I'll throw back to Bruce.
Great. Thanks, Cleat. The ultimate story, and I think what I like the praise, but probably one of the key things that that Cleat and Jeff did was navigated through to say we had a technical solution, it was affordable, but the approach that we've done is to be able to pay for that capital cost within the funding through fees and through a maintenance fund that enables us to have made that investment. A bit closer, thank you. Made that investment with no increase to non-EV owners in the building. It's a very critical thing to be able to bring everyone with us on that journey, to make the amenity for the early adopters of that technology, but to make it fair and reasonable. And that's been achieved through basically having that ability to pay for the capital that's recovered through a fixed fee to pay back the maintenance, and then through the ChargeFox platform we're able to use that user pay. Here's just the final product. This is Cleat charging his new EV. It all works. There's 2 car parking spaces. There's a bunch of detail we're happy to talk about afterwards, but they are in 2 common area car parking spaces. So I'm sure there'll be a Q&A question which we're happy to talk about in terms of navigating that planning permit. Thanks.
Get myself organised here. Nick Burt from the Facility Management Association. So we're the peak industry body that represents the interests of those who manage and maintain Australia's built environment. And that includes apartment blocks in many respects and other strata titled ventures. So can I just get a show of hands who is familiar with facilities management? Oh, that's good. That's more than most presentations I do. So you'll know that facilities management really is the integration of people, place and process. So in this case, we're talking about residents, we're talking about the car park, and we're talking about, getting all of the ancillary processes, which a number of speakers have spoken about prior, to deliver what is a good outcome for the residents. So I will take you through just a few of the highlights and challenges. They're probably not going to be specific necessarily to EV charging, but they're the processes which our members go through and support particular retrofits in buildings. So the first one there is around, the FM role in retrofits. So we're talking about the FM being one of the key relationship managers between owners, occupiers, vendors, understanding where vendors are coming from, understanding where they can get a single source of truth for information, because to, I think, Adam's point earlier, not all vendors are reputable all of the time. And so particularly in some of the examples he gave around solar and LED, there was a whole proliferation of people who were installing things incorrectly. They were giving product which wasn't warranted appropriately, etc. And so being able to sift through that on behalf of Owners Corporation or on behalf of Strata Manager is part of what an FM would be doing in this type of environment. And I guess the other thing is to make sure people are aware of the regulations that sit behind it. So ensuring that all stakeholders are aware that there is a compliance regime that sits behind most things that happen in a common area or in a building. Just by way of information, there's about 186 Australian standards that impact the operation of any building in any particular day. And so being aware of all of that, but making other people aware of that is an important role. There's definitely a role for facilities management because they're the operational management component which goes beyond installation or construction of a building or installation of a retrofit. They have an important role in making sure that things continue to function. And as you'd be aware, anybody like me who realises that, it gets frustrating when you go to pick up your mobile phone and you've forgotten to plug it in and charge it. This happens all the time in the built environment. Things go wrong. Electrical is complex and becoming more complex over time. I guess one of the things that our members do is make sure that there is an intersection between the installation and its ongoing well-being and planning for its replacement when that's required, because things don't have an infinite life. I guess one of the things which it's important to understand is that there is a relationship between operating a system and making sure that it continues to be effective, and so things don't happen by chance. From a facilities management perspective, there's really sort of three key areas there which I wanted to touch on in terms of considerations when we're talking about this. What's the impact of the usage of EV charging? How do you know what system that you want to go for? And a couple of the speakers have talked about how that's been evaluated in the case of different apartment blocks. But it's really important to understand that that you've got to think about all of the points that preceded me. What's the grid connection look like? Are you going to be the last building in the street and then have to pay for an entire upgrade and a new substation? And I think a couple of those points have come through really loud and clear, that the early movers in this space are going to have some level of advantage, I would have thought. We're talking about the whole of the built environment electrifying over the next 15 to 20 years, and so I think, if we think about some of those pressure points which are going to eventuate, it will be the capacity and supply, and people who were buying vehicles during COVID would be aware, instead of waiting 3 months for a vehicle, you're waiting 12 months or 15 months for a vehicle. And so similar things happen when you get to the point where the supply chain is being inundated with requests in a particularly short period of time. So I think planning is pretty clear. The other thing is, how do we make sure that we future-proof? So if you think about the first mobile phone that you bought, for me that was in about 1990, it had an aerial that stuck out the top. The charger looked nothing like what it does today, and it certainly didn't have the ability to, pay my bills when I walked up to a ATM or an FPOS machine. And so you've got to think about what's going to happen evolutionary over time with EVs and with EV charging particularly. What's the next iteration of things look like? And so it's really interesting to hear Tait talk about, the use of cable trays rather than just conduit, being retrofitted into places, because that's, in a way, you can put lots of things onto a cable tray over time. If you just put a piece of conduit there, you're going to be limited for the size and capacity. So it's like that future thinking, which is going to be really important. And so looking at some of the challenges, the need to be maintained. One of the things our members tell us a lot is the fact that, particularly in shared environments like strata environments, that funding is a huge issue, and that people don't, necessarily want to continue to see the maintenance levy go up and pay for additional maintenance on things. And so we sadly say that, there's always an infinite amount of maintenance to do, and there's usually a limited pool of funds to do that. And so it is important that owners understand that when a new piece of technology or a new piece of equipment is installed, that there will be a maintenance regime that sits around that. There will be an opportunity for that to be upgraded at some point. There will be an opportunity downstream that where it'll need replacing. And so being aware of those things up front and ensuring that when you install something, it's just going to sit there and not cost you anything additional. And I guess the other 2 points that I'd just like to make is, making sure that you keep things up to date. You know that the software on your phone that you've got in your pocket was probably updated in the last 6 weeks. 12 weeks before that, it was probably updated again. And so, again, there's a whole regime around making sure that these things happen. Final point is making sure that, there's equity around how this is, how all of these things are done. You're talking about managing the expectations of, various lot owners, and that'll change size and scale depending on the establishment, but important to be able to, really work with owners and make sure that those expectations are being met.
Great. Can I ask all the panel members to come up now for our Q&A? And I'd like to invite Sebastian, who particularly be able to answer questions, apparently, about strata decision-making and the legislation side of EV charging. So, Sebastian and Anthony, can you also join all the other panel members and come up? Now, if you have questions, we'd love you to ask questions. There's a microphone just to the, as I'm facing, left of the camera operator, and just come up and ask your question. Just line up there. We've got a first question coming now. Go for it.
Yeah. My question is, we have a 15 apartment block in Richmond. Most people don't have a car, but our common car spaces are outside. So the model that you use of having just limited car parking, charging things sounds really good, but I'm just wondering, how does it go on an outside car park, because all the ones that are under the building are actually, owned by the residents?
Is this a visitor's car space?
Yeah, so our visitors' car spaces are in the open air. So that would be the most obvious place to put in charging points.
Anyone want to take that? Cleat?
What we were fortunate to have, what we were fortunate to have was car parks for each individual owner undercover, and in addition to that, we had 5 visitors' car parks. We contacted our body corporate manager, who then liaised with the local council as to whether we were permitted under town planning to sequester 2 of those car parks, 2 of the visitors' car parks, for the installation of the EV chargers. So we were, there was no objection to that from the City of Yarra, and we proceeded on that basis. But it's hard to answer the specific question without having a detailed look at the site and getting, well, City of Yarra again, if you're in Richmond, approval.
Yep, grab it.
And in relation to the electrical installation, yeah, it would be possible. It may be a bit more difficult if it's an outdoor car space, depending on how you can get the cabling there in the most effective manner. But yeah, it certainly would be possible, but it might just be a bit more expensive in your case.
Great. If you'd like to just join the queue and so we can hear you on the microphone so it gets recorded, if that's okay. Thank you. Next question.
Thank you. Sandra Eadie, I'm in an apartment called the Rochester in Fitzroy, and we've been investigating the full building of the backbone and supply into every car park, because that really has a lot of merit. It's expensive though. My question is capacity. So our last speaker spoke about capacity in your street to get power into your building. What I'm curious to know is how many buildings have had to negotiate more amps being delivered to their building from City Power or whoever they're dealing with. And what's been the general headspace, so to speak, in terms of power in apartment buildings that could be used with load management to charge, overnight and at low power use periods of time. So, looking at the gate meter for a building, we can understand how much it's using, but we're just still not sure whether there's enough headspace or whether we have to negotiate for more power to come into the building.
Yeah, good question. From an electrical contractor's perspective, is that working?
Yeah, right up.
We don't know that either until we submit our work request to the power company. So it's up to them to tell us what is achievable and what's not. So, for instance, if, let's hypothetically speaking, we ask for an additional 100 amps per phase for your building if it's required, they can come back and decline that and say, no, we'll give you 20. So this is all part of the scoping study in the beginning that I mentioned before. So it's critical that when you want to go down this path, you've got to investigate all of these avenues first to understand what is achievable and what are the limitations on your site. Once you understand that, then you can start building your technical solution off the back of it. So, electrification, the further it goes, the grids aren't designed for what's about to come, the buildings aren't designed for what you've got, so it's a shortfall that we've got to deal with, but as we've found on other projects, it's also first in, best dressed. So hopefully that answers that.
Thanks. Yeah, really good question, Sandra. And one thing that really helps in that regard is the load management system. What we've seen is that most buildings can facilitate EV charging for all car spaces without having to go through upgrades once a load management system is integrated, because that allows the EV charging load to be, and charging process to be done overnight, spreading the load when there's not much building power being used.
The other thing that I would add to that is, and it was a commercial building that I'm talking about, but they basically looked at all of their systems in preparation for electrification, and they upgraded most of their vertical transportation, most of their lighting, most of their HVAC, and they managed to get their peak load, or peak demand load, from say 500 kilowatt or megawatts probably, down to about 260 just by upgrading all the ancillary services around. So it's not only just about the pipe coming into the building as much as it is about what else is going on in the building.
Right. Okay, next question, please.
Yeah, I guess I'm the chairman of the OC of a 60 apartment block in St Kilda Road. Tait and his team came in 2 years ago and we followed the process and it's worked fabulously. So I'm a happy customer. We're 2 years in and it cost us 30 odd grand between 60 apartments. And I think we've had 7 people take it up. So I think we've got capacity for 30 odd. So we're very happy customers and half a dozen apartments have sold in the meantime and all the people selling have said it's helped the sale price. So yeah, it's really just an endorsement the process works. Thank you.
It's a really good point about the improvement in property values. Next. Yep.
This is more of like a general safety question. Do cars catch fire while being charged in apartment complexes?
That's a good question. Who would like to start with that? Is that Sebastian? Yep. Just repeat the question.
Do cars catch fire when they're being charged on an EV charging station? Pretty much to date, the MFB has stated that there has been no fires with cars being charged at an EV station. We have 180,000 EV cars in Australia and none have caught fire to date. So I hope that answers your question.
The thing I would say is there is more risk related with non-regulated areas of battery charging, like scooters, bikes, and those types of things. So they're the ones to be more cautious of.
Thank you. Next question.
Just
Oh,
to add to
sorry,
that,
go.
I believe it's the equipment that actually, if you're using a piece of equipment on a scooter, say that scooter's Samsung and you're using a piece of equipment that is like a product that isn't related to the scooter, that's where a lot of those issues come along with those fires.
Thank you. Next.
And you noted, or someone noted in slides about the risk of two markets of apartments with or without charging going forward, and new builds versus, retrofitting. And I guess the jealousy many apartment holders probably have of homes that it's just as simple to plug in, and all the rebates around solar and electricity that homeowners benefit from. How much support is there now, or do you think likely support in future from government and other rebates to simplify the process or assist with the funding? Is anyone aware?
Everything that we've been advised is there's zero coming for EV infrastructure, unfortunately. New South Wales have got some funding available. Whether it comes, who knows, but the advice I've been given is no, there's no funding in the near future, unfortunately.
There's no funding specifically for EV charging infrastructure and buildings, but what are you guys seeing in terms of public fast charging stations, whether they're council-based or private or workplace? Is that growing at a rate that we need it to?
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. That's a good question. So there's most of the government funding for EV charging has got into the public sector. It's obviously helps encourage people to have the visibility of EV charging out there and promote uptake. So most of it's been in the public sector for public charging. There's also been in WA some workplace EV charging grants available, but it's a bit state to state. As Adam said, New South Wales government have funding for EV charging retrofits in strata, and they're the only state to go down that process. The ACT government is the next one, kind of starting to follow suit there with kind of testing with a pilot study there. But yeah, no word from other states as of yet.
Sebastian?
We've found that the National Construction Code has implemented EV charging on the development side, so that will ease some pressure off owners and owners corporations because it's being incorporated in the actual build process with the developer. So hopefully that assists.
Thanks. That's a really good point, Sebastian. I think that's kind of where the two-tiered market might appear. All these new builds that are in construction now will be provisioned 100% for EV charging, and that's where all these existing buildings out there have the much harder path to take of retrofitting that infrastructure.
Next question. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Diane. I'm an Owners Corporation Manager down in Bayside, Melbourne. I'd like to ask questions of, in fact, anybody in this room, as well as the panel members, more speaking to the human element of managing this and disputes that may arise in terms of how do you manage a booking system? If you've got 20 lots and perhaps 2 car parking spaces that were previously visitors' parking spaces and now they're being used for EVs, how is the, dare I say it, human element of that all working? Is there a communal booking system? Is it something that the tenants or residents manage themselves? Is there an expectation on the Owners Corporation managers to suddenly start managing booking systems for EV charging? How does that look?
We've now been going for 3 months with our system. It is a very basic system. It's an Excel spreadsheet that goes out for the next 20 days, 3 weeks, and you put your name down to book a slot, and so far we haven't had a problem. I should add, we have 2 EV chargers and 3 users.
Can anyone else speak to that? Yeah, thanks, Sebastian.
I might just add to it. The classic thing, the small engineer in me was wanting to do some modelling and forecasting, and Jeff was saying we'll be right with 1 charger, and Cleat's sort of ringing me up saying, "Come on, my EV's arriving in 6 weeks' time. We need to, make some decisions." I think it is really important to, as all of the suppliers have talked about, you've got to work through all of the risks But the two, the two big things that are impediments to EVs at the moment, people talk about cost, and we know that cost is coming down. So the major brands have all just slashed $15,000 off their price in the last 2 weeks. So that's rapidly descending. And then the next big thing people talk about is range anxiety. I live in Australia. I need to drive to Perth tomorrow, and that transcends into apartment living. I want to have my plug in my car parking space. Now, we know that doing that is expensive. We know that that's constrained and for retrofitting with headroom and those types of things. But then once you get into it, the reality is that, especially for apartment owners, your usage during the week is mainly commuting. And so the charges that we've put in, 7 kilowatt charges, you basically get 40 kilometres an hour in your charge. Yeah. So you will top it up with an hour when you get back. You'll certainly fill the whole car if you get one of the overnight booking slots. And so we went through all of that pragmatically. And then when it comes back to it, as and when we're starting to get, the early adopters are very keen, they're very sharing. You know, there's a cultural thing that I think we need to have confidence in those early stages, because we are navigating a pragmatic issue. There isn't a perfect magical solution. We're sort of navigating through technology costs, but actually ultimately, and it's the spirit of owners corporations, is it's a common area, it's a common problem. We need to sort of get that working together. The reality is that there is the clipboard up there, and there hasn't been any fights and disputes between Jeff and Cleat yet in that utilisation. And I think that does bode well, because you're building up changes of behaviour and recognition. I think ultimately what we talked about was, how do we police the fact that someone's in the spot and someone else wants to use it is probably the key thing to go. Yeah.
The other point that I would make is that it's got to be a change of mindset, and sort of, I think Bruce touched on that. You know, nobody has a fuel station sitting in their garage, right? You take your car out and you get to the fuel station, you fill up, and there's plenty of pay-as-you-go sites all around the place, shopping centres, public infrastructure. So that's got to be a part of the solution generally.
Thank you. I think we might move on. We've only got time for about 2 or 3 more questions, so let's whip through these last, because these guys have been waiting. Thank you.
I'm glad I'm in the queue then. So my question, I think, follows on from the previous one. Go closer?
Yeah.
There we are. My question follows from the previous one, and it's an equity question, what I'm really interested in this space. So the early adopters generally have finance and the wherewithal to be able to do this, and a lot of vulnerable communities probably don't. But my question's in the middle space. If you've got an apartment building with owners who don't have car spaces, but you're putting in charges for the backbone, how are we set up for making sure that's equitably distributed for the people that don't even have the car spaces? So is there conversation happening in that space at the moment? Because it just feels like an equity question.
Good question.
Backbone infrastructure will belong to the owners' corporations, so that'll be allocated under lot liability. I think that getting your building future ready, most owners should be on board for, because we are moving closer to 2030. I hope that answers part of that question.
I can go a little bit, but yeah, it is a good question, especially if you're dividing it up by lot liability and some owners don't have a car space, they would be rightly feel that they shouldn't be contributing because they're getting no benefit. So yeah, I don't actually know if you could fund it in such a way where you only get the owners who have a car space to contribute towards it. Seems the fairest approach to me.
We didn't have to face that exact problem, but what we have done is to charge an access fee for each EV user. So you have to pay $25 a month, $300 a year to the owners' corporation to have the right to access the EV systems. So that you might like to look at that.
That's a good solution, yeah. Can we have the next question? Thank you.
Hello, just quickly. My name's Andy Dawson. I'm actually the owner of Engine Property Group, who Sebastian represents today. And I just thought a 20-second advertisement, if you wouldn't mind. We're very proud sponsors of the Sustainability Expo today, more particularly this session, and thanks to all the speakers. I just want to add value as owners corporation managers. Sebastian is our Operations and Sustainability Manager, and I want to make the point that there is nothing sustainable, nothing about EV, or frankly nothing about government grants or any form of technicality that he doesn't understand. His answers today have been quick and IKEA and very to the point. So we're outside. If your owner's corporation doesn't have that service proposition, down the corridor and to the left.
Thank you. We've got time for one last question. This gentleman's been waiting very patiently. Now,
I'd like to ask about potential misuse of charges. If a body corporate was to go down what you called the hard road and install fast chargers in all the spaces, how would you handle a situation if people chose to allow friends and family or even turn their charging park into a public charging station and clog the car park up with people waiting to use the charger, which is private but has a public effect?
Who'd like to tackle that?
Thank you. That's a really good question. I guess that goes to the point that Adam made at the start in his presentation about getting the right bylaws and rules in place in the building. So there should be rules, I guess, in an owner's corporation that you're not permitting public drivers to come into the car park and park in those spots anyway. And so you should think about putting rules in place around EV charging so that owners aren't allowed to make money off public charging from their charge point.
Thank you. I think we need... Raymond, did you want to say something?
I'm Raymond. I'm part of the Spec Solar the group. I just want to raise one thing that I think, Sebastian, you can answer. And I think it would be relevant for the OCs. What are fire safety and insurance compliances that we should be aware of?
Good question to finish on, actually. Yep.
Yeah, great question, Raymond. I just want to go back to the other. There was a question that I wanted to add to earlier. Yep. Sorry for running out of time.
Yep.
I think building management systems there was an owners corporation manager who asked a question about building management, how you'd police the car space if different people are using that. And your building management system, just like your amenities management system, you can book a car space, you can book a function room, you can book the library, whatnot. So I think using your building management system is really important, and use that for your EV charging common area space. Getting to Raymond's question, in terms of compliance, the two things that we've faced that I haven't heard anything about today that is probably really important. Fire services contractor needs to have a link to your EV charger that cuts the EV charger if there's an evacuation event or an event on the fire control panel. This is more of a facility management side of things. And then we consulted insurance, and insurance requires a stop button that is in a safe area. So if there is something happening with that vehicle, the stop button gets hit in a safe area that is not near the actual charging station itself. Good question, Raymond. Thank you.
Thank you. Sadly, we actually have to wrap it up there. I've got a couple of things to say before we do that. What an incredible panel. We're going to thank them in a second. Hang on, I'll let you all clap in one sec. I've just got a couple of announcements, but I do want you to continue the discussions. I want you, if you've got any stories, if you've got any strata stories, challenges, successes, follow that QR code and let us know. We'll be writing up some case studies, which are really useful for everybody else as well. But we have a special, research project to tell you about. And it's the University of Melbourne are running a study to explore opportunities for improving charging access for renters and multi-unit dwelling residents. So how appropriate is that? If you would like to be part of that or get involved, there's a QR code there. And here's Ira here, who's running the research project, is here. So find them later. I'll maybe get you to go out into the foyer, to the SCA stand in the foyer, which is where we're continuing our discussions. She'd like people to join a focus group, and we've got a flyer to hand out as well. Is that right? So, massive thank you to our panel speakers. I'd like you all to big round of applause to Adam, Sebastian, Tait, Nicholas, Cleat, and Bruce, and Anthony too. I've got some cards for you. If you'd like to speak to them, a number of them, I think all of you have got a stall here, possibly except Bruce and Cleat. So find them in the supplier showcase. But I wanted to do a special shout out to these session sponsors, because I run an expo like this and you cannot do it without your sponsors. So a massive thank you to Engine Property Group and Specialised Solar, because without them, you're not here listening to this awesome panel. So special thank you to you. Thank you. So hop out there to the SCA and continue your discussions. And if you would also like to hashtag us on social media. If you've got any photos, insights, stories, we'd love you to do that. Today's about networking and finding your people. So go and enjoy. See ya.